Welcome back to the basement. Now an update on the bike. The bike is still at my friend's house, who is the stainless steel fabricator. He's doing that as a favour, the only payment being a bottle of whiskey. So it is just to be done when he gets a chance. So it's likely to be a couple more weeks before we get the bike back, but it's going to be a hell of a lot better exhaust than I ever could have done. It's going to look awesome, and it's quite important on this bike is the turbo's the heart of the bike and it's where everyone's going to be looking. So it was one of those places that needed to be done properly. But saying that, there's been lots happening in the background. The most exciting thing is that thanks to Ian in Auckland, we have a spare engine. Now this is very important as it speeds up process hugely, because it means we can be setting up the fuel injection, the ignition system, the turbo, cooling, all on the engine in the bike that I know runs well despite using a bit of oil. And in the background simultaneously we can be rebuilding and prepping this engine for the turbo. Secondly, I'm currently selling my little sailboat. Great boat, but I've worked out it's the best way to fund this project without getting a divorce. So a couple of the big ticket items have not been ordered yet, but they'll be ordered as soon as the money from the boat comes in. So we're talking the ECU, the associated parts with that, the coils, and pretty much everything related to the ignition, the front fork internals, getting the turbo professionally rebuilt. But in the meantime, there's still a heap of design and building that we need to focus on, and that's what we'll start with today. So the things that we've currently got underway, the obvious one is our front wheel, where we're changing from the standard 18-inch by 2.15-inch rim to a 17 by 3-inch rim, and this allows us to run modern race tyres, essentially what you'd see on a Pro Twin racer, or a bit smaller than a 600 with the 110, but proper race rubber, which we need. The other thing we've got in front of us here is the rear rim, some updated spoke conversion rings that give a broader, better contact area for the spokes, as with the increased load of racing, the current ones have been sharing spokes, so that should hopefully solve that issue. We've got the prototype under-engine radiator, which was proven to work in my last race meet, but it's just been made out of a methanol container painted black. So really need to develop this further to make a properly designed scoop that's fully sealed and make sure we have enough cooling when the turbo comes on. Then we've also got the really important things, like we're going to make a custom designed trigger wheel to run off the tapered shaft for the fan, which is there. So we'll actually melt off this fan to get to the aluminium insert in the middle, and we'll then fix a custom made trigger wheel directly to that, and then make a bracket to hold the two separate Hall effect sensors, as to run a dual spark ignition we actually need two, and almost run it like two individual ignition circuits. So we'll get into that, which is hugely important as it determines the timing for the whole ignition system. And then we can also start looking at mounting all the other various sensors as soon as we get the bike back. Then we're just going to have some generic motorbike things like full rebuild of the front brake system and adding braided lines. We're going to be trying to make trays to hide our electronics best we can, keep them waterproof. But that's all a lot to take in, and we can go into a lot of detail, but we'll address each item by item. And today we're going to start with building a spoked wheel, so the conversion of a Comstar wheel to a spoked wheel, and we'll put it all together. Let's get into it. I apologise about the delay in getting the CxTurbo videos out, but we've got racing on the Suzuki 2-stroke in 2 weeks, which has been taking up a lot of my time. If you do like classic racing, check out the other half of my channel and we'll be posting some pretty cool race footage. Otherwise, after race day, we'll be accelerating on the CxTurbo project. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to film the first step, but all that's involved in that is cutting the central hub out of the existing Comstar wheel. And you can do that with a reciprocating saw or a grinder, both work well. Then it's easiest to cut these bolts rather than try and undo them. I cut through the nut and then split them and the bolt just pops out. So now we're going to make that hub fit into this rim. So first step will just be to give the hub a good clean while it's not covered in spokes, and then we'll fit the adapter plates, lace it up, and then put it in the wheel truing stand. Job done. Let's get into it. First step, retaining plates with retaining compound and high strength Loctite. Torque 28 Newton meters. Now time for spokes, starting with inner spokes, then going to outer. pretty good. Let's turn this into a trigger wheel. It's slow, but we got there. Look at that, beautiful. Okay, I don't actually have the hall sensors yet, so I've printed 2 dummies just to install so I could check clearances and make sure it looks alright, and it's looking pretty good. Clearance is slightly off on this one, the bottom one looks pretty good, so I just have to move this over a bit. But now I'm looking at it, and since the aluminium casting setup seems to be going pretty well, I've changed my mind to try and fit in with the pre-82 class. I'm going to try and enclose this whole assembly with a cover and try and make it look similar to the Honda cover at the bottom, but with a simplified version of my logo on it, to try and keep it looking aluminium and also keep it out of the rain and reduce risk of anything hitting it off the front tyre. So I'm pretty happy with the general setup, but I'm just going to redesign it so it can handle an enclosure. And I'm also going to do a bit more research on the teeth of the trigger wheel, make sure this 26 one missing tooth is the best layout at this size, or if I should drop some teeth to make the gap bigger. But I'll do a bit of research on that, then I'll send it off to the laser cutter because it needs to be a ferrous metal to pick up by the magnet, so I'll get it cut in mild steel, and then we'll look at casting the enclosure, do a bit more design, casting the enclosure, and should be job done. Unfortunately, I can't take the credit for the exhaust. The mastermind behind that is Brett, who has kindly helped me out amongst his own projects, but there are a couple of things I can do just to help out, and one of these is to drill into our dump pipe here for the oxygen sensor bung. So this is a bit tricky because from what I've read, you don't want it too close to the turbo and you don't want it too close to the end of the pipe because it gets contaminated with clean air. So unfortunately I've pretty limited options, so I've decided to go for more heat and take the risk there rather than a contaminated result. So hopefully it works out alright. Okay, that didn't go overly smoothly, but we got there with the tools I had, which is always a bonus. And now that is ready for welding. Okay, about a year ago on Marketplace, I picked up this old Duncan kiln for firing pottery at a really good price. And I've been meaning for a long time to set it up for casting aluminium. So I finally got round to it. Hooked up in parallel 6 of the 8 coils, which has a good amount of resistance, and it pulls 30 amps, which stays within my 32 amp fuse. And so you might have seen my other video, but we just started by doing a test run of recasting the engine badge for the CX engine with a custom CX turbo. There's a full video on it, but I'm just going to put some highlights here. That is a lot heavier than I thought. That's all we have time for in this video, but for the next video we'll get the bike back in the basement with the exhaust done, go through that, get the tyre on the wheel, get the wheel on, and then we'll sort of look at casting and finishing the new cover on the trigger system, and then we'll start looking at a whole heap of things on the bike once we got it. If you like the channel, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.